Great. Well, I guess we're going to get started. Welcome. This is ATARC's Digital Services Virtual Summit. For those who don't know, my name is Tom Suter. I am the CEO and founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. I'll be moderating and emceeing today's summit. For many of you already are familiar with, but for those of you that are not, ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We're a nonprofit that brings government, industry, and academia together to kind of solve these hard problems like digital services, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. I'd really like to thank the team over at ICF. They've done a great job kind of facilitating this and helping us put this together. Amy McKenna, Joyce Donker, David Yang, Byron Caswell, John Dove, Jake Ukema, and the rest of the ICF team. And they've been a great partner of ATARC. And I think we're going to have a great day. We're going to kind of like have a keynote. We're going to start off with Jeff here in a minute, Jeff Schilling. And then we're going to have some panels. We're going to make these very interactive. We're going to have poll questions. We're going to ask questions. And please be sure to check in with the polls. That's the way you're going to qualify for your CPE credits, which is important to many of you to make sure that you get that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our visionary keynote, Jeff Schilling. And Jeff is the Chief Information Officer and Chief of Information Technology at the National Cancer Institute. Jeff, can you bring your camera up? How are you doing today, sir? That doesn't look like NIH headquarters there. I don't know.
Well, we're still on Max Telework. So yeah, this is my, this is my offsite location.
Great. Well, I'm welcome, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you for keynoting today.
Okay, great. Thanks. Really great to be here. And if you guys could bring up the slide deck, I'll get started. You can go to the first slide. So hopefully these slides are all okay. I generally have help with these, but I did it myself this time. So it was a lot of fun putting this all together and hoping to give you some kind of cogent message about what we're doing. And I want to introduce myself. I'm basically the Chief Information Officer of the National Cancer Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, which is part of Health and Human Services. And I really need to give a shout out to my chief engineer, Sue Pan. She also runs the Digital Services and Solutions branch, which is basically what our Digital Services Center is under. And then just a brief introduction. NCI is 9,000 staff. You know, we have about 15,000 desktops that we run for those staff, lots of servers. And our mission is, you know, we really have such a great mission that it is something that we don't take for granted. We know that it really helps motivate our staff a lot. And, you know, we're here to lessen the suffering and death due to cancer. And we really do that through doing research here in the Washington, D.C. area, funding research, billions of dollars throughout the country and some throughout the world, and also providing education on cancer and a lot on cancer prevention. And so if you could go to the next slide. I'll continue this a little bit because, of course, all solutions are built in the context. They're built in the context, right? So I need to give you some of our context. And I know Stacy's on the panel today, Stacy Album, and she'll be familiar with this context. So, but I'm speaking really about the National Cancer Institute, not so much the National Institutes of Health. And so we really have a lot of MD and PhD staff. And they're a pleasure, a joy to work with, amazing, so smart. And so that's something that we have. We have this massive brain power that we work with. We really have impressive networking computing capabilities. We have a massive internet connection. We serve more data throughout the world through the National Library of Medicine than anyone else. NCI, we have 2 authorized capabilities in the popular cloud services. And we really, really have a great culture. So that is something that it's very much of a pleasure to work here. And scientifically, there's a lot of review of all the science that goes on. And scientifically, we're world class. Really, some of the largest research organizations in the world are at the National Cancer Institute. But you know, however, we still use email, PDFs, Excel, and Word documents to move information around. Not scientific information, we have great systems for that, but how we actually run the NCI it's still pretty antiquated. And we have to integrate with HHS and NIH on how they work. And so there right now, we really don't have a synchronized plan for how we're going to do that. If you could go to the next slide. And so with that backdrop, I really wanted to say what we're really, the way I do it, you know, this is kind of my show at this time while I'm the CIO. I was at NIH, or I was at NCI previously, so I had a good experience and I had a good understanding of how the organization functioned. But really, that our vision for the Digital Service Center is to provide a highly capable services to the staff to minimize administrative burden, to make sure that it's measurable, to result in the workflows that provide authorization of the services, and then also to provide information for process improvement. And I really, really do think that vision is important. You have to lay that out, and you have to be able to communicate it. You have to be able to audit to it. You have to be able to get money for it, right? And so, you know, you don't really need to know how you're going to get there. Of course, technology changes. It's going to create new avenues for you, but you really need to know where you're going. You kind of need to have that, and this is the CIO perspective. So that's what I really wanted to make that clear, that it's not implementing technology. It's really kind of using technology to implement your vision. If you could go to the next slide. And so so basically, we're going to just talk a little bit about implementation, and really we need a technical solution. And so we stumbled upon with a vendor, and which is now ICF, on this idea and this concept of digital service center. And I remember the meeting today like it was yesterday, now that it's maybe 4 years ago. And Supan and I, and we tested it, and we were like, hey, this could actually work for us. And then so we had some quick wins. We had some things that we could use to show that it was going to be viable. We worked on getting a contract in place, but then I also started working with the customers, you know, with which we generally call them partners now. And you know, I really made a misstep there. You know, I was so excited about how all these great things we could do with the digital service center, but I really didn't realize that I was telling them that their systems were old and ineffective, and that the work they were doing was not good. And I didn't realize that, to me, that's a normal thing. I don't really think anything we're doing is that great, you know, business wise. So that didn't really seem to be a stretch to say that to them. I thought they would agree. Oh, they did not agree, not at all. And so this is one of the quotes from Arthur Schopenhauer, who's kind of a German philosopher back in the day, and I found this to be very, very true. That, you know, when you come in with these new ideas, that it's basically ridiculed, like, hey, what are you saying? You don't know what we do. You don't know how complex it is. And then they realize that it might actually move forward. They really oppose it. But then after a while, after it takes hold, everybody's like, yeah, that's no big deal. That's no kidding. That's the way to go, right? And so it's accepted as being self-evident. So I think you just have to understand that those things are going to happen. People are going to just inherently push back. There's not perfect trust. Everybody's different. So if you could go to the next slide, I wanted to cover this a little bit about how we kind of address this culture thing. And I called it creating an environment for success. And I wanted to quickly say that I use this thing called, and it's the worst spelling, but it's called the Canavan framework. And I really think you should check it out. When you get the slides, there's kind of a link, or there's some details about it in the bottom. And it really helps you understand a little bit more about what problem domain your issues are in. And, you know, we decided that this was kind of a complicated problem, and that we would kind of use a this probe, then sense, then resolve model. And so what we decided was that, you know, okay, let's try some things. So let's get leadership buy-in. So we told them how awesome digital transformation is going to be. They were like, what are you talking about? That didn't work. But then once we started showing them some of the things they could do with this technology, showing them dashboards, showing them actual data, showing them reports that before they couldn't get. They had to wait weeks to get that information. Now they could get it at their fingertips. They were like, hey, this is awesome. I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been talking about. Right. So this is what we're talking about when we say digital transformation. And so forget the words and the stories, find their pain points and show them some minimal viable products. But then you have to deal with the middle management, which Gartner sometimes will call the frozen middle, right? They're the ones who have to actually make the change, right? They're doing the work and they understand how it's being done, and they're not as accepting of change as you might think. So really what we did is we basically cherry picked a few groups that we knew wanted something better. They didn't love their systems. They just like, listen, this system's here to get something done and it's not working for me. And so we're working with those to create more minimal viable products and to not really just say this is the digital service center, because the digital service center through leadership has kind of been approved as the way to get stuff done, but also that we kind of have to curb all the other ways of getting stuff done and make more work come through the digital service center so that it's architected in a way that works for the future. Because of course, all the data needs to be aligned together for us to realize that future vision, which is kind of a digital and also digital decision making. So if you could go to the next slide, I want to get to the technical solution at least a little bit. And so what we like to use is kind of that old tried and true people process technology model. And so I'm going to use that today just to cover this for you quickly. And so, what we did in terms of the people model is we really discussed this vision with our staff, the staff that are centrally provided to the NCI. But we have many dozens, 50 or so other technical staff throughout the Institute that are doing all kinds of other things. And we really need to introduce this vision to them. It was different. It was very different. And the idea of not just IT and then building a solution on top of IT, but another layer, a layer of digital services that is an orchestrated view of how we consume IT. And we have new constraints today, right? The constraints of the past were IT. Now those constraints are lifted. We can have hundreds of SaaS products. We can use many cloud services. So now the constraint isn't the IT, it's really how to utilize that IT to build something. And so all of a sudden now we need to constrain how people are building things so that it all works together, right? And then so in order to do that, we put an institute-wide IT for the IT staff. We train them in Lean. We really like to use that for its value process management and a way to streamline the requirements. We formed this DevSecOps team of all the NCI's development staff, not just my development staff, but all of the NCI's development staff, so they can drive the requirements moving forward. They're like, we work for you. What do you all want to function? Because we can't have 50 cloud environments. We can only have one. We can only have one in each of the cloud providers. And I use some of my CIO authority to do that. And then lastly, we slowly built a team of a few Fed staff to coordinate this. I don't have a lot of Fed staff, so it's been a struggle for me, but we're doing it. Could you go to the next slide? And then basically the process, again, we really wanted to focus on a very strict intake. These efforts have to be successful. So this is what we used: willing partners, technology we know will work, and capacity. We can't take in work if we don't have the ability to deliver a solution right away or on their timeline, because we don't want to have failure at this point in the game. We need to monitor work to make sure that it's actually getting done and issues are getting addressed. And then we need to communicate. And then however you want to communicate. Whether, like I give you some options, and each group is different, right? Each group has a little different, their own little culture of how they work. Some are serious, some are fun. But the main thing is communicate until they tell you they've had enough. And then and then you can actually find the right cadence. But don't have them asking you for information. Okay, next slide. And so, so basically, we have a lot of technology. We use generally ServiceNow for our low code and workflow. We have Palantir Foundry as a data aggregation capability. We have identity and access management provided to us by NIH. We use other cloud identity and access management as well. We have the DSC model, which is really successful at some other federal agencies. We've been mapping business processes for several years, so we have a lot of understanding of what's going on and how chaotic and crazy it is. And we don't really have a solution to replace. No, it's not like we have a big answer. We mostly have kind of very old systems, even some Power Builder, things like that, or people are just using Excel and email to do information. Next slide, please. But on the downside, we really still need an overarching system architecture. We don't have one. We've kind of been struggling with that. It's something that I really want to have, so I can put it in contracts. You know, that the IT contract has to align to this architecture. I want the NCI developers to see it and say, oh, this is how we do that. This is how we store data. This is how we build our APIs. And then also I want to be able to audit to it. Like, are people really following it? Just doing some kind of scorecarding. And, you know, we're building this as we go, which is not really ideal. I would love to have somebody who really knew how to do all this and did it already, but I don't. And you know, we lack the federal staff. We have tons of developers, but not somebody who's created something this big for an organization our size. And, you know, we continue to address these gaps. This is, of course, normal for the way that we deliver IT. We kind of push into the unknown, and then we kind of address it. I'm very comfortable doing that. As a scientific organization, that's how we work too. So it's pretty comfortable. And you have to find the right cadence for your organization. It's somewhat of like a risk of into the unknown. And we have people who they're really willing to take a risk at the leadership level. So on the next slide, I wanted to basically, you know, in conclusion, you know, for me, this is the CIO perspective to you. So I really feel the CIO is the leader of all the IT going on underneath them. And you need to really be solid for that. You know, you need to show them at some level, you have a vision for what the future is, and you need to shine the light into that future so they can see it. There's a million futures, but you need to shine the light on the future that you see. Because they're not going to see it without that light, without that communication, without the visioning, meeting after meeting after meeting until they finally get it. And so, and it happens today. It's every day. So I'm a sucker for these motivational quotes, a super sucker. So I have thousands of them, but I picked out two, and basically that, you know, hey, even though the future seems far away, it begins right now. Every day, every talk, everything is all around preparing yourself for the future. And then this one from Williams Jennings Bryant, you know, destiny is no matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. It's not a thing to be waited for. It's a thing to be achieved. And so those are the things I bring to my staff to keep them motivated and excited through the chaos. So I just wanted to end with, I hope you're excited for today. I really am. There's so many good speakers and panelists. I'm excited to participate today and hear all the great information.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Hang on for a minute. I got a couple questions for you, at least one. I like the fact you call the baby ugly. That's like, I've done that a few times. It's kind of, you think it's ugly, you think everybody knows it's ugly, but sometimes that doesn't work so great. How do you deal with folks that are traditionally not coming along with a program? You know, every organization has these influential people that are, oh, here comes another initiative. How do you engage them and at least mute them?
Well, that to me was a surprise. I mean, I came from a division that everybody followed the leader. It was a big division, 3,000 people. But at the NCI, all of a sudden I went and you know, I said, oh, the director wants us to do this. They're like, yeah, I don't believe that, right? They're like, I don't believe that. What? So I think what we did is we said we need a strategy. So we kind of created a strategic plan. we use something like objectives and key results. So we have objectives and key results that really describe what we're trying to do. So we can get our team on board as well. That's difficult, right? Because people don't always interface with me. Sometimes they interface with my staff. And if my staff aren't aligned with what I'm saying, because I haven't really communicated in detail, that throws everything off. But I can tell you, it's in my notes. So if you distribute my slides, they're in my notes, exactly the answer to the question you asked. What I did is I avoided all the naysayers. And I just focused on the people who want to work with us. And then this is my belief, is that once we have this success, and once people see this, the way the data is now not just collected, but our authorizations can go much faster. Instead of months, they can just happen in minutes. And then all of a sudden we have all this data. They're going to be like, well, everybody's got to go that way. And everybody will say, well, yeah, our systems are terrible compared to that. So it's really kind of to do that, right? I think to paint a picture and have success. And traditionally, I just call it leading from success.
Right. No, I think that's the strategy. And there's always, as you know, Gartner, we have these laggards, eventually they catch up, right? So fantastic. And I think we got bonus Jeff today. I think you're going to be on the second panel a little later today. Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Jeff. That was a great way to kick things off. My next panel, if they want to just jump on, we'll get right into it. And before we start this panel, just remember, if you just ask questions along the way, I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, and we'll just take it from there. So if the panelists can go off mute and come on, I got Sean Wabenga, Phil Latout, Major Evan Adams, and Sergey Trostman. So I'll do some quick intros in a second. There we go. All right. Okay, I think we got a quorum. So I'll do some intros. Just wave your hand when I bring you up. But we've got Sean Wabenga, who's informatics specialist at U.S. Food and Drug Administration. We've got Phil Latout, Executive Director, Information Sharing and Services Office at the Office of the Chief Information Officer, United States Department of Homeland Security. And we have Major Evan Adams, who's a product owner and information systems engineer at Project Ridgeway within the Core G35. What is that? That's the 18th Airborne Corps, U.S. Army. I got to get used to this Army lingo. My son is a second lieutenant right now in the Army. I got to kind of get caught up to speed on this. And last but not least, we have Sergey Trostman, Division CTO at ICF. Thank you all for joining us today. And we're going to have each of the panelists kind of give a little talk about what their day-to-day life is on this topic. And then we'll start asking questions, and we'll stick in a poll question or two along the way. Why don't we start off with you, Sean? If you can, where are you working out today? It looks like out of your home office, I take it?
Yeah, I didn't take the time to set up a nice background. I do apologize for that. I thought I have it on Teams and on Google on Google calendars, but not on this one. So next time I'll be prepared. You can see
I've
my
got a few hundred of these. You're fine, believe me.
You can see my clutter in the background here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Sure. So Sean Wabenga, I am a program manager in the Center for Drugs at the Food and Drug Administration. Specifically, I oversee the implementation of systems for new drugs and a lot of the system modernization activities that we do here for drugs that are being used in clinical trials, and also drugs that are just about ready to go to market for the greater population to use. So it's a very, very critical need. And I have, and a lot of us here have very much bought into the mission. And now it's just a matter of, taking all that passion that we have and bringing it to sort of end users and bringing them modernized solutions and pulling them away from those legacy systems, which yeah, if you walk into the room and you say everything you've been doing over the past 10 to 15 years has been really inefficient and not so good, you're going to offend people. So we also have to sort of dance around those conversations, especially when you're dealing with like a doctor or a medical officer who's been doing this job for over 30 years, and they're pretty much, very accustomed to what they do. And especially when they're making decisions that's going to affect the general public in the way that it does when you're approving a drug for a lot of people to use. So there's a little bit about what I do. So developing systems to support, that sort of FDA approved stamp that drugs get before they go to market, is really the high level thing. So.
Great. Thank you for that. Next, let's go with Phil Latout at DHS.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm the Executive Director for Information Sharing and Services, also known as the Solutions Development Directorate. And my responsibilities include the support and delivery of something called the Homeland Security Information Network, HISN. We also do a lot of the application development for DHS headquarters and some enterprise applications. And, I've been in the federal government for about, maybe too long, 15 years. So I've seen a lot of different things. Before that, I was a contractor working for various federal agencies doing systems integration. So I've seen a lot of the issues that Jeff described and things that work and how some things just seem to come back full circle as the technology evolves. And one of the things that I struggle with as a headquarters entity, as well as somebody who's providing solutions for all of the USM Undersecretary for Management divisions like CFO or procurement or HR, is that how do we delegate responsibility out to the various organizations of what they can develop, what they can't develop, what they should be using for central kind of development services, or that we can delegate out to them. And so, one of the things that Jeff has hit upon in a large organization, there's you can talk about digital transformation, but there's also a lot of shadow IT out there, or rogue IT, or business-owned systems, depending upon which way you want to characterize it. And where do those lines of responsibility between the CIO organization and out into the business unit, where those lines get drawn? And I think there's a lot of situations where there's no black and white answer. And so one of the things that I struggle with on a day-to-day basis is how to tell people that their baby is not only ugly, but it needs to get a job. And anyway, so that joke, is going to die flat. But there's a lot of problems telling people that we're not going to let them do their own systems. And things like ServiceNow have the low-code environments have inspired people to do a lot of things that they end up creating a lot of mischief, and that there's a lot more governance and oversight that's needed. And with that, I'll let you pass on to the next person.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. And next, we'll go with Major Adams.
Hey, thanks for having me, Evan Adams. So as you mentioned, I work with the G35 at 18th Airborne Corps. I got to say that second lieutenant is probably like the best rank in the Army, because nobody expects anything from you. So everything you do that's positive, you're just like your stock is rising until you pin first lieutenant, and then it's just crash. So anyway, so I've been in the Army for about 14 years. I basically went on this panel and won this competition to develop something called Rangefinder to help us to better reserve ranges. I always bill it as like the Airbnb for ranges on the Army. So anyway, in that, I've never done any software development before that. I knew nothing about it. I thought I was just going to win this contest and somebody else was going to build this thing. Little did I know, like, nobody else in the Army knows how to do software development either. So they basically said, hey, figure it out. So I got wrapped up in kind of the innovation ecosystem in Project Ridgeway, which is like the action arm of the innovation cell of 18th Airborne Corps. So essentially the responsibilities kind of include like I guess, being kind of the grand poobah of the innovation ecosystem throughout our Corps. So all the other officers and NCOs and soldiers that kind of like start talking in that realm and finding solutions and discussing problems. We kind of take that and amalgamate these like solutions, right? We lead a lot of the discovery when it comes to that. So talking to soldiers about their daily problems, what the issues are. Earlier I heard mentioned these PowerPoint presentations, which the champions of the Army right now. So making those systems live and trying to make life a little easier for soldiers. Recently, the product owner side, my day job, the thing I get paid for is the Outload application that I developed with Palantir that we implemented for the Afghanistan retrograde, and then as well as a rangefinder with ICF. So that's kind of the daily scope. The things that really interest me is, again, that innovation cell, the discovery with soldiers and getting soldiers closer to the solution generation.
Great, thank you for that. And Sergey, I know you see things a lot across government, and you also are a commercial company that does work with the financials and healthcare. Look forward to your perspectives on this topic.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning. My name is Sergey Trostman, and I'm the CTO for the Digital Transformation Division here at ICF. I think I would summarize my background as mission advisor and enablement, which in my career and my daily work translates to portfolio modernization that is applied through the lens of enterprise architecture, and also includes delivery oversight on large transformational programs. So I think to add to some of the topics here, I think one of the more prominent client challenges that I see daily, specifically with respect to any transformative change, essentially includes balancing architectural or visionary infrastructure, technology spectrum, and governance components with the need to quickly provide value during those transformation efforts. So while this value can be delivered by instantiating what I'll call a fabric or catalog of lean solutions in response to the immediate customer needs, it only solves a portion of the broader digital transformation challenge. And so identifying that effective ratio of value-driven results to those global foundational elements is essentially critical to the success of other things, such as the enterprise roadmap and the overarching long-term vision for those programs. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you for coming. Let's go to a poll question really quickly because it was addressed in the keynote and addressed by these panels. Let's go knock one of these out here. What do you feel is the top reason for digital transformation failure? Cultural resistance to change, inability of contractors to implement quickly, inadequate risk management, security concerns, lack of clear vision from leadership. Just put the one that you want that is the most. We probably could have done a kind of weighted thing, but I think this will work. So let's. What kind of results are we getting back, Alyssa?
There's no select all option here.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, exactly. I think there will be a lot of that. I think Phil.
I try to be polite in these panels. Tom, I'm going to say that the one you left off is ineptitude. I mean, and that's a harsh way of saying that the skills needed to employ the solution aren't as fully developed as they need to be.
Yeah. What do you think we need to do to address that systematically? I mean, that's a big one.
Well, I think that, that's one of the things that, kind of Jeff talked about in terms of, how he is answering that problem at NIH in terms of having his shop providing that expertise and help. And I took it as he's, providing leadership and mentorship in terms of organizations of how they want to do that. But in a lot of cases, there's people who see the promise of technology, they believe the hype, they get a quick success and think that they're following good engineering discipline, but in fact, they've kind of put themselves into a corner and they don't know how to move forward. And I think that the only way I could say that for the vendor community out there, well, you just have to hire a better vendor to implement your solution. But enterprise architecture, the design patterns, having those proven within an organization and making sure that that you have the I'm going to try to avoid the word governance, but you have the review processes in place to make sure that they're being followed and that the repeatable processes are in fact repeatable.
Yep. John, you want to address the people aspect in the training?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of times we go into meetings and have conversations and say, well, what we have is not a technology problem. We do not have a technology problem. We have so much available to us. What it really comes down to is the people perspective. So, and I think a lot of people forget that, you know, this information that is needed to be able to design and develop a system that's going to work takes, you know, a decent amount of empathy and a decent amount of just sitting down and talking to the person who's going to be on the other end of that technology and understanding their pain points. I think a lot of times we want to just charge in, roll our sleeves up, develop stuff, and some of that gets set aside because there's only so much time in the day. But you know, it's worth taking the time to sit down with people and say, hey, this is what your day looks like. Here's what you need to see at this point in time, and then making sure you take, you know, then you can roll that into the training and say, okay, you know, we've exhausted so much energy in building a system, testing it, you know, going through all the iterations, you know, the sprint planning, all that, and then you sort of forget about like, hey, somebody needs to sit down and have a train. You need to have a rollout plan. You need to get trained. That person needs to go to the training, probably then go and use the system, and then maybe come back to the training or reference some of the material. So there's a lot of people stuff that goes into it. And when you get to the, you know, you know, us technology guys, you know, a lot of times we just want to play around with technology, and sometimes that stuff gets set to the side. So I strongly recommend, like, don't underestimate it, because change management and all this other stuff, that's going to make or break you when it comes to rolling out a system, because you can spend all the time in the world on a system. If nobody wants to use it, it's not going to be successful, bottom line. So.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And, you know, Major Adams, this is what the Army does, right? They put you in new challenges all the time. How did you and your staff, you know, get to install Palantir and do all the other things you did as far as your program?
Yeah, so it's kind of two-part. One is we sat down, like you said, with the customers that were using it, and we just kept making it easier or kind of addressing their concerns until it actually made their life easier. A lot of problems we saw has just been, you know, well, this technology that you're trying to implement takes too much training for me to understand, and I need it right now. So unless I can pick it up and use it right now and it provide value, then it's useless for me. You're just adding more work to me. So that's kind of the first step is making it as easy. And it sounds like a lazy approach, but these people are working, you know, 18 hours or 12 hours on a shift, on and off, through weekends and holidays. So on my end, at least with the DoD, I see that as our responsibility. And it's just, well, does the boss want to see this? So like, if what they're doing does not directly translate to what the boss wants to see, again, it provides no value. So the cultural shift of going from a static presentation where I'm not going to be caught off guard by data that's going on behind me, that is the second kind of challenge that we see that we need to address. So how leaders can get engaged with it early to understand the information and understand where the information comes from. That's like really the second challenge. And that, again, that's kind of where we fit in.
And Sergey, I know in our poll, we kind of flashed it up there. I think we had the cultural resistance to change was number one. Surprisingly to me, I mean, maybe not surprisingly, lack of clear vision from the leadership. So you get engaged with the leadership. What's good leadership? What's bad leadership? What's the right? How can you make that customer successful? What have you seen work for you?
I think if we're talking about leadership, then what works well is when technology can align with the leadership's vision, and establishing that vision up front in an agile fashion, I think is critical to these efforts. And I think we keep going back to the same theme, and I definitely agree with Phil's topics related to standards and governance and some other elements that are essentially critical prior to beginning the massive spread of MVP development and implementation of technology. So in an agile fashion, so when we speak lean, we typically think about implementation, but lean can also apply to the strategic aspects of implementation. There's nothing to say that it cannot be done in a lean fashion, developing the vision, the target state architecture, aligning with the CIO shop's vision, and establishing the collateral that brings all the stakeholders to the same level playing field and understanding what that vision is. That can be done quickly. It should be done quickly prior to engaging or as you engage in various MVPs and various rapid value elements that I mentioned in my opening. So I think aligning with the leadership in a way that puts everyone on the same playing field with collateral, with various vision statements, or whatever it takes specifically for the organization to align everyone's thinking on where we're going and put that target out in front of everyone.
Great, thank you. We got a question from the audience. I'll kind of take that and apply it to everybody. But where are you using, and I'll start with you, Sean, because it's directed at you, but where are you using low code? And let's go back to the business decision of why you chose low to no code, and where's the appropriate place to use low to no code? Where's the appropriate place to develop, government software?
Yeah, and I would say that, in the FDA and the Center for Drugs, that issue is not 100% resolved. I know in the past, with some of our legacy systems, it was all it was all government development, no commercial off the shelf. And then we've transitioned to sort of these low code platforms. I think the key was, and I think a lot of different groups are like this, that our business side said that what we do is so unique that the solution needs to be highly customizable. So I think a lot of the low code platforms provide that customized option, and then we throw in a ratio of custom development into those low code platforms as well. Especially with a lot of the integrations we have to do, the systems have to talk and be connected to a lot of other systems because of the visibility of the information that's flowing through. So right now it's very much a balancing act with more of a trying transition toward the more commercial side. But you always fall into like certain situations where you say, oh, this needs to be a completely custom solution. So that's where we are, and then it's picking a particular commercial solution as well. You got to make sure you're really honed in on your assessable alternatives for some of these things, because a lot of them have a lot of benefits and a lot of power to them. So,
Major Adams.
I'm sorry to disappoint. I don't have much to add. I guess, what are you looking for? What?
Well, I think like what made you choose Palantir than doing some custom software or some government software? Around that business, I would consider that like a low code type of tool.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because the low code piece is very attractive, and especially to us, but it's such a small amount of people now that kind of understand what it really takes. And I say that because it's very techy, and we are historically bad at tech, right? That's why I joined the Army. I did not want to do an office job. But we also don't have a lot of the decision. We can't really make those decisions. So it's constantly a game of like, well, can I do this? No, you can't do that, which keeps us back in that PowerPoint and Excel kind of game. But the reason we're looking at it as a very big potential is like, as we go forward and as this develops, I think a lot of that blood will be kind of in the Army, and we can kind of go from there. But at the moment right now, it's a very difficult kind of problem to solve. Is like, how do we upskill the force enough to actually implement these solutions? because we can do it really easily internally for like a company or battalion, but like after that, it just becomes not a mess. I hate to say mess, but that's kind of the big problem that we're trying to address, and it's really culturally that we're trying to address it. So Palantir is just happens to be the program record that we can use. Do I do anything in Palantir? Absolutely not. I'm kind of a moron. But I can translate the soldier piece to Palantir, and then they just use that to develop a tool. It's the same thing I did with ICF. I didn't develop a damn thing. I just sat there and I was the good idea fairy in the room that actually got nominated. So again, sorry to like disappoint you with the.
No, it's good.
Yeah, that's really it.
Yeah, this is the honest panel. I like it. Speaking of honesty, Phil, I know we had good discussion about this yesterday. What are some of the things you got to watch out for? Some of the pitfalls with low no code.
Well, I think that probably the biggest issue is that it looks too easy. As you know, I guess I've had a fairly long history of developing transaction-oriented systems and going from technology like Tuxedo or enterprise Java Beans and some of the other technology that's evolved over time. Things like ServiceNow and Salesforce are very enticing in terms of being able to collect data very quickly, to be able to throw up an interface that is multi-user and authenticated and with strong authentication. And everything looks really easy until you start to really confuse the underlying data model. And so there are some concerns that you need to still follow some very kind of old school classic procedures of developing a model of the data, understanding of what data you're going to collect, and then what data you're going to expose to what entities for reporting. And I think there's still a good bifurcation between what a transaction system and a reporting system, and those rules have been pretty consistent over the years, regardless of the technology that becomes available. And so, part of the art is understanding where those boundaries exist and how to best use the tools to manage their, to emphasize their strengths and to avoid their weaknesses. And I know that sounds like a fortune cookie kind of answer, but that's if it were science, we would have far more IT successes and far fewer failures. But we still have a lot of failures out there, or things that don't work out because actually doing systems integration is a non-trivial effort.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, and I would just jump in there. So I would just jump in there and reiterate that yeah, a lot of these solutions are saying like, hey, we can do this in a month or two. Yeah, you can throw a proof of concept together that is not operational. But if you want to get something that, like you said, 3,000 people are going to use and it's operational, and then you have to, have a system of record database behind with transactional data, that's going to take a lot of time, and that information is not getting translated to the business with these solutions. Say there's actually a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. You're looking at the shell.
Well, I think there's definitely addressing, hey, I have this bid and we do this and you show me a proof of concept, then I put it in your environment and it has to be refactored and it costs a lot more than I thought. It takes more cloud computing. I think that's definitely an issue. Sergey, I'd like to have you a chance to talk about this topic a little bit.
Sure, these are all excellent points. What I would add is that yes, the low code and no code platforms are excellent for meeting certain capability needs. They package a lot of products and services together, but ultimately you do have to architect them at the solution level with the broader scope of the enterprise, the analytics, the consumption of the data that they store, how it's accessed, how it provides value to other stakeholders in the organization has to be reviewed up front. But perhaps even more importantly is integration, is actual other assets in the enterprise. Who else is consuming this data from perhaps outside of agencies? What are the security or pipeline concerns to get to that data, and how can they be structured or pushed around other consumers in the enterprise? So I think as a capability, it's excellent for meeting specific needs, but those other concerns have to be addressed. And you have to look at the broader picture of how those tools act within all the other assets in the enterprise in terms of not just investment, but also the technologies involved.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's go to our next poll question. We can put that up, and it's basically, what is your top concern for failure to execute on transformation efforts? impacted customer user experience, increased cost of taxpayers, internal workflow inefficiencies, negative impact on employee morale. We'll give that a second, and we got some more questions from the audience too that we'll get to. All right, what do we have, Alyssa? There we go.
I would agree.
Yeah, you're trying to improve things, but then it impacts the customer. Sergey, does that make sense to you, or in your
Yeah, I think
experience?
I mean, transformative efforts in general really need to succeed. There's obviously a stigma in our industry about large or transformative projects failing. And we talked a little bit about this with relation to change management or risk-averse technologies, and folks saying our systems are fine, we don't need anything. We've seen this, tried before, it does not work. But essentially, that's correct. If you engage on a transformational effort, it needs to succeed. It does not need to succeed in a bing bang approach. It needs to succeed with rapid value or wins that show and start to bring in the stakeholders that you're trying to challenge with the transformational effort to buy into the process, to buy into the target, and again, back to the point of putting everyone on the same strategic view of where the North Star is, so to speak, of the transformational effort, and then showing that you're making milestone gains towards that effort. And obviously, if it fails, that there's immediate impact of the negative thinking about IT and its implementation of that effort, and obviously around everything related to it. So absolutely, the impact to the customers is critical.
Great. We got another question. Jeff Schilling, who's not only our keynote and a panelist, he's also a good attendee, answered on his own there. So thank you, Jeff, for that one. I think it was in regards to kind of like accentuating systems that you have with newer technology, you know, RPA and virtual reality, and how are you all looking at just adding to your portfolio, whether you had a no code or you know, government or any kind of system, you know, these new technologies that are going to save, you know, theoretically could save a lot of time, like RPA. Maybe start off with you, Sean.
Yeah, so I mean, we use RPA for a lot of automated things. We use it a lot of times when it comes to keeping legacy systems up to date. We use a low-code solution that sits on top of your legacy system, but those two systems need to be in sync, so the user puts in information into your new UI, and then, you know, the bot or the RPA solution goes in and puts that information into the legacy system, and that lets us sort of float until we can sort of decommission some of this stuff. But there's an abundance of things you can do with these tools. I think it very much plays nicely into sort of this modernized transformation that we're working on. And then once you do get into the workflow space, there are, you know, anytime you have a manual step that you automatically know needs to be done, there's no need to have a human being actually doing that. So you can use it for that as well.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Phil, what have you seen in your enterprise? Some of these newer technologies being used as well.
Well, yeah. Well, if you mention RPA, I'm gonna have to spit or something. I think, quite frankly, I'm very down on RPA. If you can use RPA to do it, you should be spending the money to re-architect the solution. Yes, it's a good bridging mechanism for some things, but in a lot of cases, you're basically just perpetuating things that need to be replaced. If workflow is a great thing, having automated processes to be able to do that, that's not really RPA, but you know, RPA is nothing more than screen scraping. And that technology saw its heyday, you know, probably back when a lot of people, it had a happy life in the 1980s. I think that there's using services, using workflow packages, using low code to be able to automate things. We need to invest our money in things that have a future, not just something that's going to, you know, smear some paste over something.
Yeah, and a lot of the systems are kind of incorporating in their stack. So rather than having an independent thing,
it does come with a lot of stuff. Yeah, it works very well with like a quick and easy integration that needs to be done to hold you over. I mean, we used it when COVID started happening. We started getting flooded with COVID applications, and we used RPA to sort of pick through and pull out a lot of the information. And we could do it, within a couple of days. We could have that set up. So I know, I get what you're saying. I think it is a good temporary stopgap. We have an RPA team internally, but yeah, if you're looking at a long-term solution, I would agree with that, Phil.
Major Adams.
Hey, yeah, no, I wanted to chime in really quick for us. The biggest thing is back in like World War I, World War II, it was all industrial, right? However, the manufacturing process was really where all this innovation took place, and how we got asymmetric advantages, right? We're past that now, though, and we're into the information age. So all these emerging technologies, this is like the new ground for the military to see how we can implement these things. And it's taking a substantial amount of effort to kind of change the way we perceive these things, because we've never had to really worry about data or information or any of these new tools in the past. It's really about how do we integrate and how do we decisions better, faster, and more informed. So a lot of these technologies, it's just kind of with like potential and possibilities. So that's kind of where we go back to the innovation sphere and the ecosystem, and kind of tapping into the younger soldiers, the partners with industry and all these, to see how we can implement these things to gain that asymmetric advantage, because it's not going to be done in the factory anymore. We're over that, and it's really being able to capitalize on that kind of the spark of kind of creativity. Does that make sense?
Yep. And Sergey.
Sure. So with RPA, essentially, there's also smaller baseline part of the broader hyper automation movement, which also ties into digital transformation if you look at it, how those kind of intersect. But definitely RPA is something that at its core is meant to facilitate repetitive tasks or things that we want to take away from, the hours or the time consumed on the daily for resources. But it absolutely should not be a long-term investment when there is a need to re-architect or re-engineer how workflows or processes are implemented by the systems. But it definitely provides rapid value where at the moment, in a certain moment in time, you identify repetitive tasks that are taking up a lot of time or consuming, cycles where they need to be used elsewhere, and also to bridge between actual re-engineering where that needs to happen. But absolutely has its place in a lot of use cases lately, and I think those use cases are only growing in industry.
Great, thank you. Got engaged panelists are answering questions on the fly, so I'm going to ask one of the questions we have now. How do you? What are some of the challenges to achieve regulatory compliance or agency compliance when you're implementing some of these newer tools? Maybe start off with you, Phil.
We probably a good 25% of my week is spent talking to lawyers, and whether or not it's the paperwork reduction, whether or not it's privacy, whether or not it's records retention. There's at least at Homeland Security, there's a lot of concern in terms of how we effectively manage or share information. And so I think one of the things that we found is that we need to get the lawyers involved early in the process, and so that they're in as not as the afterthought, as well as the security people, of course, as well. But for us, it's having privacy and a small cadre of lawyers involved. The earlier the better, because then they understand, they have buy-in. And when we were doing a lot of the vaccination work, that figuring out how many people within Homeland Security out of 225,000 employees, who's vaccinated, who's not, the lawyers were very active participants in the requirements and understanding how the information was being managed. And so there are no shortcuts other than engagement.
Great. How about, we'll go with you, Sean, over at the FDA. I've heard you had a few regulations over there.
Yeah, just a couple for us. I mean, obviously, you know, the PRA and all that other stuff applies to us as well. And I would just reiterate is try to get like half of my time starting out on a project is just socializing the project with the different groups that need to be at some point in the loop, because you never want to take people off guard when it comes to this stuff. That's always going to set you back on a project. So, you know, as often and as early and then of course be charming and nice to people goes a long way as well when you need a security approval and stuff like that. But yeah, communicate often and early is the best thing that you can do to get those approvals, because things do take longer in the government. That's bottom, like that is the holdup, is the regulations that you and those hurdles that you need to get over. That's what's going to take longer. It's not necessarily the other stuff. So very important.
Yep. Yep. And Major Adams.
Yeah, I will echo the lawyers being in, especially on the Army side. It has a lot to do with our authorities. So there's regulatory guidance as far as like information and data that we have, but it's also like in ForceCom, and I answered this question, in ForceCom, we don't have the authority to develop software. So I can't say that I am a software developer, or else it's going to come down hard on me from 3 stars, like how I'm not a software developer. But what I can do is configure, you know, the existing licenses we have. What I can do is work with actual software developers to, again, kind of tie soldiers closer to that. So there's not really a way around it for me, as much as this is how we find solutions and get soldiers kind of closer to that generation piece.
Yeah. Thank you. And then Sergey, I mean, you deal with customers all the time. This has got to be one of the top bullets in your kickoff meeting, right?
Yes. So what I would add to this is that typically the policies and compliance is codified across one or more systems. And I think it's critical when you implement the solutions that codify those business rules or whatever related to policies, that you architect them so that when those policies do come down or change, often mid-year, you can implement them quickly. There's often deadlines, and IT is impacted with a dead set date where certain policy has to then permeate through systems. So that solution architecture is critical around that component within the system, so that when you're modernizing, you implement a framework that allows new policies, new rules to not take an extensive amount of time to implement, so that the agencies can comply with their IT.
Thank you. Let's go to our last poll question real quick, if we can. All right. Probably could have been the first question. How familiar are you with your agency's federal strategy, digital transformation, application modernization? And that's if you're a contractor or working for somebody, you can just, with the agency that you're working on. Let's see what we have. I know some agencies have had their digital transformation. We did an event with NASA last year, and they just launched this huge digital transformation. I know some other agencies have done it. Yeah, that's actually maybe a little better than I thought. Any surprises here, panel? Okay. All right.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised they're moderately familiar. Yeah.
I do.
I would think it'd be a little bit lower.
Yeah. So what strategies can you have? I know everybody wants to have this big kickoff for the year and do all this work. I know I have this at ATARC, right? What do I save? What do I do incrementally to improve the organization? And what do I, really have this big plan that I'm going to implement? What are, how do you keep things going like a factory and innovate along the way? Maybe start off with you, Sean.
So yeah, so how do we maintain things while being innovative?
Well, how do you do innovative, maintaining, keeping the lights on? It's like, how do you keep innovation going along the way, rather than, okay, we're planning for this big project 3 years from now? I think that's the gist of what I'm trying to get at in this question.
Yeah, and it seems like you can plan for a really long time with this stuff too. I always like the sort of like, you're going into battle mantra with planning and saying, well, the plan is only to get you into battle. Once you get there, the plans change, right? So I I like to have a good shell and a good strategy in place, but then be ready to for changes to be made. Also, you go into these things and you say, okay, we need to move from on-prem into the cloud, and of course that's straightforward. You have a system you're using on-prem, or you have databases you're using on-prem, and you need to. But if you're going to spend the time to pick that effort up, then how are you going to make it better? So you always use those as the opportunities to innovate, because you don't want to do sort of a replica in the cloud and then still maintain all those inefficient and ineffective processes that you were using. You need to find ways to take those as opportunities to make things better, and always look at it that way. If you're going to pick something up, when you're done with it, it needs to be better than it was before. And if you take that perspective, I think you're going to be successful.
Great. How about you, Phil?
Let me get off on mute here. I think the key for us is having a repeatable set of patterns, and to while you can architect everything uniquely and have a perfect solution for one given thing. What we found is that having a set of design patterns that we can repeat, and they may not match everything 100. They may not be 100% bespoke, if I can get that word out, but they're much more effective in terms of getting things done faster, and so that we can alter or tweak things as necessary. But having that set of design patterns that the team knows how to implement, that the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, that the technology is set up to expand horizontally, allows us to be much more effective in terms of meeting the solution. And that's one place where low code has come out to be a real winner, in that we've been able to replicate things very quickly and stand up applications in very short order that historically would have taken months to do. We've done in weeks. And so that's what we focus on, is having those design patterns.
I'm getting you're a process guy. You want to have a process for everything, and then
I'm not a process guy, but I know what works, and the team knows what works. And it's more about, if you have a playbook and everybody studies the playbook, then when things go wrong, we know what alternatives there are and how to improvise. And so, the process is plan for chaos and embrace it when it comes.
Right. Major Adams?
Yeah, so the strategy is great and it's very necessary, but avoiding innovation theater is kind of our whole goal. So it's a great idea, and then we have to churn and get a solution going, but then it has to immediately provide value. Like I keep saying, it has to provide value immediately, or nobody wants it. And that's kind of where we get in that realm of like, hey, that was a great idea, but where is it? What has it done for me lately? And unless I can point and say, hey, it went from processing per stats took 15 hours, now it takes 15 minutes. That's immediate value, and that's where you get a bunch of people jumping in and adding to these ideas and implementation. Without that, it kind of just dies in the water.
That is a really good point. I've been doing this for a little while now. I've seen so many of these projects. Oh, it's great. The Federal News Network, we got great coverage. Jason Miller covers it, and then we never hear about it again, and it died somewhere. So I think it's important, but it's pilot to production, right? You've got to bring something to mark, to your organization. Sergey?
Yeah, so purely from an innovation perspective, I think it comes down to, for example, how we deliver digital services as an engagement model, that part of the process includes reviewing various requirements and rapidly assessing either industry, academia, or other evolving areas that we keep an eye on to see if there's an alignment for some innovative solutions with a particular requirement and a service offering that we continue to implement. But ultimately, yes, it has to be done rapidly. It has to be within the bounds or constraints of the broader architecture and vision, and it has to provide value, or it does die off quickly. So kudos to all those points as well.
Great, great. We're closer to the end than the beginning, and I probably won't get to any more questions, but feel free, if you don't have a chance, panelists, you can go answer them after the panel if you'd like. There's a couple ones in there, not a whole bunch, but where are we going to be? We're right at the end of the year. Where are we going to be at the end of next year in your organization? What are you trying to get done in the next year that we can talk, maybe a preview of when I get you back next December? Starting off with you, Sean. I know you're in a lot of planning now. At least my organization, we're doing a lot of planning for next year.
Yeah, I mean, we're, especially with the federal funding schedule, we have to plan out almost 2 and 3 years for actual funding that's coming in advance. And then we have sort of at the FDA level, with what the commissioner is working on, and then we have our own center and Center for Drugs level and making those systems connect. And I believe even at the HHS level, we had to put together a 10-year plan for acquisition strategy. So it's a constant, and those plans are always constantly changing because the technology does not stay the same. So we're in a constant cycle of planning, migrating to the cloud infrastructure more and more as we go along, and then addressing things that come up as they come up, such as this whole pandemic that came about really changed things for us as well. So
Yep. Phil?
And Tom, are you throwing some bait out there for all the business developers in the audience?
I didn't intend that, but I guess maybe I am.
That's okay. That's okay. I think what we're going to do over the next, actually, Sean brought up something very, who planned on the pandemic? And so that changed our work very much for this year. And I think what we're going to be doing is going back to building out the existing infrastructure that we have in terms of developing applications and developing solutions for our business units. We're going to be focusing more on one of the technologies, I guess, natural language processing and handling some of the document classification that we have going on. We have a number of new projects that we're standing out for our data services group and relying on better reporting solutions and ingesting more data to make that available. So there's a number of things that we have been doing this year, and we're planning to expand on those things in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think one of the things that we've had a very successful year, and we're going to build upon that success.
Great. Thank you for that. Major Adams?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be in 18th Airborne Corps next year, but I can tell you that a lot of their efforts in the cloud I think have the highest potential. We've created a couple instances where we use virtual machines to increase the capability of some of our mission command platforms, notably the Dragon Cloud, which uses CPCE, our new command post computing environment. So that's a huge prospect, and I think that's going to go and pay dividends. But also this innovation ecosystem that just kind of stood up, and I keep saying that because that's really what it is. 18th Airborne Corps really institutionalized it with Dragon's Lair, asking for submissions and solutions to problems, but that has spouted large kind of shadow government of people just reaching out to me or the other members of Project Ridgeway to discuss kind of what they're doing at their level and some of the other either pitfalls or ask for questions for how to improve their processes. So I think that's going to continue to expand into something that's not so much a shadow government, but something that's very well known and open, because there is a lot of hesitation to that change. But I think culturally, that's going to be where Project Ridgeway and 18th Airborne Corps goes, is a larger cloud presence, better adoption of these new tools, and a more open approach to solving these problems.
What's your next post?
I'm actually, so I just VTIP'd, so I was an armor officer. I'm a fake nerd. Like I talk the game, but I don't really know anything technical. I go to the information systems engineer course in Fort Gordon next month, actually.
Good. Well, congratulations. That should be a lot of fun. See you in your next role, hopefully. Sergey, can you put a bow on this panel?
Sure. So from our perspective, we'll continue to support the various mission areas that we support with excellence in service delivery. But I'm more forward-looking into actually bringing some of the emerging technologies into this space with various machine learning or hyper-automation and collaborating with our customers to bring those technologies into production and bring that value from industry into federal.
Great. Thank you for that. And thank you, Sean, Phil, Evan, and Sergey. This has been a great panel. I've enjoyed it a lot, learned a lot, actually. And have a good rest of your day. If you want to hang out and answer a couple of those questions for some folks in the next minute or two, that'd be great, too. And now I'm going to introduce the next panel. And if you can put yourself on, we've got Stacy Albom, who's Deputy Director, Center for Information Technology, the National Institutes of Health. We've got Omar Bouashi, who's Emerging Technologies and Innovation Director, U.S. Housing and Urban Development. And we also have Edward Dauglio. I always pronounce it wrong. Daugialio. Ed, I'm just sorry. I can't.
Hey, Tom, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Jeff Schilling returns, Chief Information Officer and Chief of Information Technology, National Cancer Institute, and Byron Caswell, Vice President of Strategic Consulting at ICF. Welcome, and we will start off. Maybe Stacy, if you can kick us off here. Good to see everybody. And you are actually in the office, I believe, right?
Correct. I'm a few floors above our data center and high performance computing environment. So in good shape here in Bethesda. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Stacy Albom, the Deputy Director for NIH's Center for Information Technology. CIT is one of NIH's 27 institutes and centers, some of who you've already heard from here today, and most of which have a specific research agenda. Our role at CIT is to serve and support the entire enterprise as we provide the enterprise IT infrastructure services and support needed to achieve NIH's mission of making important discoveries that improve health and save lives. So thank you, Tom and ATARC, for inviting me to be here today in such good company that I'm sure will make for some great conversation. I'm also a member of ATARC's Government Advisory Board and have enjoyed participating in that open forum for government and industry to collaborate.
That's a good point. I didn't want to include that in your title, but that sounded like a little bit self-serving, but thank you for bringing that up. Well, now I'm almost forced to go over to Edward because he's another board member. And if you would introduce yourself, Edward.
Hey, Tom. Good afternoon. My name's Edward DeGello. I work for the Department of Transportation at the Federal Transit Administration. I manage some of our emerging programs and some of our platform technologies. You know, at the Department of Transportation, our biggest thing is to ensure that America has the safest, most efficient, and modern transportation system. You know, recently there's been a lot around us about investing in America's infrastructure. You've probably heard a lot about it with Congress and things like that. With my part of the mission in particular, I work for the public transportation piece of it, which is the Federal Transit Administration. And, you know, when you look at that group, we particularly focus on helping agencies like WMATA or MTA. So those are the subways and buses that people use in cities. I think in DC, it's particularly important because 1 out of every 3 people doesn't actually own a car here. You know, we rely more on the mobility of the city. For us in particular, we do it 2 ways. We focus on safety and we focus on capital investments. And so when you look at the systems that we build, most of them focus on those 2 areas. Thanks, Tom.
Great, great. Next, let's go with Omar. And are you in the office, sir?
No, I am not. I'm not. But it's a pleasure to be here. Very privileged to be with this panel. So thanks for the invite, Tom and ATARC. I work for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the program office I work for is called Jenny May, which has for mission varying funding for our affordable housing. And also we help and we have for mission the eradication of homelessness. So this is our mission. And what I do for Jenny May, I am responsible for Emerging Technology and Innovation Lab. So I have for task the assessment and the evaluation of all new technologies. That's including RPAs, blockchain, smart contracts, low code, no code, and also AI, machine learning, and deep learning, and all the algorithms associated with that. So that's what I do, and it's been a very interesting time for us. Technology is moving fast, and as you know, we need to make sure that the government is equipped to handle that change without impacting our operation and without missing the opportunity to save taxpayers' money. So again, it's a privilege to be here.
Great, thank you. And Byron, love to get your perspectives on this topic from the industry. I know you're doing a lot of work with the government, as everybody knows, but you also do private sector things. Just love to hear your opening comments.
Yeah, so I run our health, defense, and commercial programs on the ICF side in our digital transformation group. So a lot of what Stacy, Ed, and Omar mentioned, that sort of hits home because it's sort of the solutions that we're bringing to bear across the the industry verticals that we support. It's sort of funny because as we translate through the modernization transformation journey for our customers along the path that just gets them to the resilient organization to be able to deal with the next crisis or pandemic or regulation change or mission switch. Our commercial clients kind of have a very similar path, though the goal winds up being a little different, right? More resilient for swings in industry. So using low-code platforms to democratize development and modernization efforts, using AI and ML and to really look at how they do business better and sort of get on that low-code transformation to RPA, to automate processes, to hyper-automate, to machine learning, and to hyper-automate, to feedback learning into process design and development. It's sort of a common theme across it, and it's just a question of where on the right on the path that our customers are and sort of what their investment roadmap and plan can be laid out to, and then how we can support them there. So it's really great to grab perspectives from all the panelists here on it.
Great. And Jeff, can we bring you back? You're my color. I mean, Jeff has been working overtime today. He did the kickoff. He's like engaged with all the with the audience during the last panel, and now he's kind of back and clean up here. Just while I have you, what were some of the takeaways that you got from the last panel that stuck out to you? You got a couple points?
Yeah, I think I think the pandemic has had a big effect on how we work, and so at NIH especially. I mean, Stacy and I used to work together all the time, creating schemes, trying to figure out how we were going to get stuff done. And we barely had any contact with each other. We're just like heads down, trying to address some of these issues. And so I also felt that the disdain for RPA was fascinating. I'm kind of a not big RPA fan, but I do feel if you have to deal with, in the government, you have to deal with other people's things. And so we have to send our stuff up the chain, of which we don't have any ability to reinvent that, much less put an API on it. And so RPA can save us tons and tons of time. Now, the only thing to say, it's a very fragile connection. You're putting two pipes together with like some duct tape. If those pipes move at all, it's going to break, or if there's too much pressure, right? But the reality is we have staff double coding all the time from one system to another because those systems don't talk. Or there's not enough money to build the API or even connect it if there's an API there. So I thought it was very fascinating. I thought it was a great panel. And I think the military guy, I don't remember his name, I thought it was so funny how he comes in with no IT background, really I'm just a solutions guy, and says, that's the thing that I think is very new today. It's all there for us, right? You see little kids using it. So it's there for us. You just have to have a vision to say, listen, we can do this, bring the right people in, and then just work through the problems. Like you said, listen, people didn't like it day one, they liked it day 60. We eventually just change it till it fixed. So I just did want to quickly say, you know, for us, we're, like Stacy said, we're about research, basic research like yeast and little organisms, how biology works, all the way to big million people clinical trials. If you guys watch football, you'll see it, right? The All of Us program is advertising with the NFL. They're right there. Join the All of Us cohort, which is 1 million people. We just want to follow them for their life and see what happens. Which ones stayed healthy, which ones got sick, and what made the difference. And so we're massively like a data organization. I'm very interested to hear what Omar has to say, because it's so different than from what we do. You know, they're processing a lot more standard, normal human information. They're interfacing probably with the public a lot more than we do. I'm very excited for this panel.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple poll questions to get us kind of kicked off and get the discussion off. Can we, plus if I don't do it now, I forget with like 5 minutes left and I'm a bad moderator. You never want to get on the bad side of the CPE people, so they're pretty critical here. What are your biggest challenges with implementing your agency's digital modernization strategy? And obviously we could easily go all the above, but concerns over security or ownership of data, lack of skilled employees, partners, or contractors, challenges with procuring products, solutions, or services, challenges with keeping pace with normal operations while modernizing. I can't wait to see this one. I think it's all the above. Probably would have been 100%, I think, but let's see what the folks' biggest concern is. Can we put that up? There you go. That actually surprised me. Maybe it shouldn't. Does it surprise you guys? I mean, you were just, well, I guess Jeff and Stacy, you were just talking about how busy you were. You barely have chance to talk, right?
Yeah, I wanted to vote, Tom, and I couldn't.
I know.
But that's the one that my mouse was hovering over. I'm not surprised at all. But if there was another option for all of the above, I definitely would have selected that one.
Yeah, I think we underestimate how busy you all are, and it's like, how do you find the time? How do you find the time for innovation? So maybe that's our first question. How do you knowing how busy you are, how do you? And we had a question in the last one. How do you innovate on the, continuously? And Stacy, we'll go ahead and go with you since you were chiming in already.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. So. Well, I think the most important thing that we've done in light of this constant challenge of keeping up with normal operations, especially in these unusual circumstances, well, the need to, modernize and transform and implement more of a digital workplace is still a priority, is to frankly take a strategic pause and realize that the reality during this pandemic, which is still ongoing, the top priority has been continuity of operations and the safety and well-being of our people, which include our staff and our patients. As Jeff mentioned, we have a hospital here right behind me, our clinical center. We're conducting clinical trials. And so that was the most important thing. And it didn't make sense to, to just, kind of keep going with a number of our strategic assessments and plans for next generation modernization efforts that we had at the start of 2020. Fortunately, just given the frankly heroic efforts of our entire workforce, not just our IT workforce, which really brought their best and rose above enormous challenges to keep the agency operating, but also our entire agency that has come together as a community to stay focused and deliver on our mission. So what we've now done is we've stabilized, and this pandemic is going to continue for the foreseeable future, is we've regrouped. And it's actually better that we kind of took that pause, because now we're looking toward the future of work and supporting that vision. And our people, all of our people, again, not just our IT people, are more ready to embrace a digital workplace that wasn't in maybe as much of a high demand prior to the pandemic, when we weren't as distributed. And we're going to be shifting to some form of hybrid environment. And you can do hybrid well, you can do hybrid poorly. And so we are looking to do that well. And we need to really take some time to assess and evaluate and experiment with what that looks like for NIH. So we are focused on modernizing and expanding our core capabilities, you know, from our enterprise high-speed network that supports NIH big data needs to a pretty robust suite of collaboration and communication tools. And we are taking advantage of the momentum that we gained during this pandemic to do it with, you know, speed and creativity in ways that we never necessarily, maybe we believed we could do it, but now we've proved we can do it in such a way, you know, innovate in a matter of months, which prior maybe would have taken years.
Well, I've had a webinar or two on that. This pandemic, it's just incredible what people were doing in short amounts of time. I don't think they thought they could do it, and they just did it. Omar, love to hear a little bit about what you're doing over there at HUD on this topic.
In terms of innovation, we are definitely have a very good plan in terms of instilling a culture of innovation and encouraging all the program offices within GNMA to innovate. But that's not enough, because for us at GNMA, we have, like, let's say, 3 distinct areas. One is running our operation. Now that needs to run without any disturbance, without any challenges. So that stays, and, you know, and it's very effective. The other one is modernization. So modernization is bringing GNMA to the cloud and making sure that there is enhancement and that we are keeping to all the standard patching security requirements of our current systems and solution. And that's another area that requires the proper focus. The third area that was added is innovation. So for us, we started our innovation lab, where we welcome the vendors, we welcome solutions that have not been tested, that needs to be assessed by GNMA, so we can understand its impact. Also, we need to understand how it can be incorporated within our landscape. And that's a safe area, safe zone, that solutions come in and we bring use cases that are relevant to GNMA, and we display them, we demonstrate them with this new technology. And that has been running for about 2 years now, and it's been very effective. And we have been very successful in introducing a couple of new technology, like low-code, for example. That's a new thing that were introduced. RPA, that's another area. Even machine learning, some algorithms for data anomaly assessment has been introduced. And we're looking for more stuff to incorporate, but this innovation lab has been effective, and it has been a way to weed out things that are very disruptive. But still, I mean, it's on our radar. The innovation lab does not really mind this disruption. It welcomes disruption. But for us, we have created this zone where we can assess, you know, things and make sure that the solutions are well vetted. In terms of the voting that happened, the survey, I'm not surprised, because for us, operation, it's the most important thing. I mean, everybody focuses on operations. So that is, I will agree. But in terms of what has been added, and I agree with Stacey, it's all the above, security has been added as one of the key element to be assessed by innovation. That's a new thing. I mean, for me, I was just looking at solution, but now cybersecurity and security is something that innovation is tackling. They're assessing it. They're seeing exactly how we can innovate in security. So that's an area that just been added, and I'm very, very, I'm looking forward to conducting that work. So just adding to Stacey, we have added innovation as a culture, but also we have added innovation lab to make sure we have a platform to test these new technologies.
Great. And Ed, how's the Department of Transportation? How are you, operations busy? How do you guys keep doing the innovation while you're on this moving train?
I think we're lucky because we made some good investments early, dating back to 2012. We jumped into low code, for example, and things like that. You know, before the COVID even hit, most of our stuff was already in the cloud. You know, we already felt like we were at the point of modernizing. COVID really helped us prove that that was true, actually. Because when you look at us from like a grant making perspective, which is what we do most of the time, we do about like 13 or 14 billion dollars worth of grants. We did about like 28 to 30 billion dollars worth of grants in the last year. We were able to hit scale with it, and there weren't that many issues except for increasing the amount of bandwidth and throttle that needed to go through because everybody was working remotely. When you talk about us and investing in modernization, you know, there's different ways that I look at it. You know, since all of our projects already deliver on an agile type of framework, which was every 2 weeks, it was easy for us to pivot or change priorities of things that we were working on because, you know, there was already like small increments of things. But, you know, some of the things we do to that too is like we make sure that there's like technical debt incorporated in every single sprint. So like 20% of the team's work ideally goes towards other things, which can be, for example, innovation. So, you know, we might decide rather than just spin out another contract to use some of the existing cycles in that sprint to do RPA integrations. And like that's where we really tested RPA for the first time to see, you know, how it would work with two systems talking to each other, was we just incorporated it into one of our little sprints. Then, you know, we can also make larger investments, which was like our machine learning program. And with that, you know, we started out with something small. It was under 80,000. Then the next cycle was over 150,000, but they were all small acquisitions, and we grew the size and scale of it as we learned more each cycle. And, you know, with those types of things too, when we're doing like lab type experiments, we have very well defined out deliverables of what we're getting, and we try and do fixed price on the deliverables so that we, you know, we can test for the outcome of whether or not those deliverables validate what we really need. You know, I think it's just a matter of making time and doing small things to learn enough to then determine whether or not you want to invest in the program and where the use cases really match up with the program. For us, with AI or machine learning type of technologies, we realized in the end that it was just developing an organizational capability around data science, which is the automation of data for analysis. So, you know, we realized we could do it with things that, like, you know, weren't really AI or ML related, but like grant calculations. So we calculate all these apportionments every year, and you know, one of the things is we have multiple scenarios. So by using data science and automating the data analysis, we're now able to calculate all these different scenarios really quickly and, you know, be able to make decisions faster. And so you wouldn't think of that as an AI or ML thing, but that, again, is just learning from experiment and seeing where a use case matches up. As you know, like you look at the path for us going forward, I think, you know, we were able to handle the COVID stuff. I think the infrastructure bill may introduce some new challenges. So we're trying to understand some of the impacts policy-wise that may have on our agency. I know for sure we're going to be hiring more staff to deal with this. So, you know, how do they fit? Are we going to have to create additional processes or provide additional oversight because of things that are in the bills? That may have some impact. And then the other thing that was really important, and I like what Stacy was talking about, was, you know, she was talking about like the workforce and how it's been changing and shifting. So, you know, like to me, I think about it in a way that, you know, I used to go to the office, and my whole organization, like at FTA, there was like maybe 1 day a week of telework. So I knew for sure whenever I was in the office, the majority of people were, and then like there might be 1 or 2 people that weren't, and I already knew what day they were. And then, you know, the paradigm has shifted now, like during the last year, and everybody is not in the office. And I know occasionally, like, you know, Tim might be in the office, and if I need something, I can just talk to him and he can mail it to me or things like that. But it's like very transparent. And then we're going to move to this hybrid one. And like, that's going to put things in another type of array where, you know, you might have half the people in the office, half the people out of the office. So, you know, Zoom calls and things like that might not work as effectively. So, you know, how do you enable digital with that? And so, you know, we talk a lot about thinking about the strategies of that, because, you know, like now I'm going to have to go to multiple things. I might have to look at an Outlook calendar to understand if somebody's in the office, and then whether I can schedule a meeting to have it in person, you know, what conference rooms are available, do they fit the size of people? So like, I'm going to have to deal with multiple pieces of information. So how do I like aggregate that all together to be useful? And then, like, what if things change again? So really, to me, like, as we keep doing these shifts, what's going to be important with any solution we put together is, like, how much agility is built in that solution so it has flexibility to deal with the changes that are going to constantly keep happening. And I think that point was something that we did well with some of our other solutions, such as our grant solution and our oversight solution, that really allowed us to deal with COVID. Was, we solved for one problem, but then we thought, well, these were the areas where flexibility really needed to exist. And I think going forward, that's going to be a really important thing, because what we assume for today is not going to be what tomorrow may look like. So be careful with your investments, would be my warning.
Yeah, I mean, we've learned over the last 2 years, that's for sure. Great, thank you for that, Ed. Byron, I'm going to go to you. And your answers are so fascinating. I keep forgetting what the question is, so I got to keep doing it. You guys are getting too innovative. You're getting too good for me. I'm like kind of forgetting what I'm doing here. But yeah, we're back. The original question is, how do you keep pace with normal operations? These government folks are busy, Byron. How do you help them modernize when they're so busy it's hard to even get a meeting with them?
So actually, there's a great saying that one of my former clients used to have. It's like, this is, modernization programs are like building an airplane while you're flying it, right? And that's really true of, we have so many critical things for all of our customers that cannot fail or cannot go wrong, because they provide, either enormously valuable research service, citizen services, or core operations functions to the actual mission and business of the government. And those things are keeping mind on that while looking at modernization and innovation programs are very critical there. And I mean, some of this is, go back to like organizational design and program architecture for how innovation can happen, right? And a lot of what Jeff said in his keynote, I think, is really, really critical there. As how do you encourage innovation? How do you accept and manage innovation? And how do you deliver on innovation sort of in context of normal operations? And some of that, I mean, a lot of that first bit is a cultural change, right? How do you take continuous improvement and elevate that to a core value of the organization? I think Omar said something almost exactly like that earlier, because as scientists do research, they're always looking for ways to improve doing research. Take that paradigm and say, okay, as we do the business of supporting an agency, how can we do that better? And encouraging that culturally, making sure that the process of innovation isn't locked in an individual place, but is sort of more broadly available to participate with people who are saying, I have an idea, this is something that's causing me challenges. And that's what Jeff said about RPA of, I'm doing this thing manually over and over and over again. It's like, can I automate that to free myself up for human work, let computers do what they're good at? The accept and management process of innovation, that's really the process area of it. I know that at NCI there's a called a Q branch process of how do you look at innovative ideas, but FDA has a very similar advisory management. FCC has a very similar one. All of our customers have ways of looking at the overall enterprise architecture, the options for how things could be done better, and then seeing where some of these new ideas can align closely, and then providing resources to say, let's prove it out. If we can do something valuable and do it quickly, then let's go operationalize it. And that turns into the deliver on innovation. So like in context with other things going on, how can we take those ideas and then operationalize and execute them in a way that is transparent, can be communicated out to to the stakeholders for it, to create that continuous virtuous cycle of, hey, we can continually do things better. And it doesn't always have to be a massive procurement, or it doesn't always have to be this long drawn out acquisition process with a long drawn out requirements process with a long drawn out development process. Like, we can get real business change happening in weeks, days, in some cases. And creating that feedback loop that builds a culture of, okay, yeah, we can continually improve and look at things the way we do. And it isn't set in stone that we do things because the system says we have to do it this way. It's the business demands that we have these outcomes. How do we best go and get it? And when you get users that aren't necessarily technologists thinking in those terms, like, you get a really awesome partnership where now you can be viewed as a solution partner and not just, the guy who provides ping, pipe, and power at an agency level. And that turns into a really powerful transformation engine, I think, is sort of, a lot of our panelists are talking about.
Great, thank you for that. And Jeff?
Well, so many great answers, and Byron stole mine. I really do think it really starts with kind of a strategy, right? I mean, you have to really have an assessment of, and the strategy comes from the users. Where do they want to go? What do they want to do? It can be pain points, it could be visions. You know, you have to corral them up. And I thought Stacy was going to mention that NIH is just embarking on its kind of first IT strategic plan. And so that's going to be fascinating. And I was asked to sit on the panel to help do that. And I've done a couple of them at NCI, and it was eye-opening for me how much disdain there was for the strategic planning process. And then people think it's not going to do anything. I'm like, I'm just asking you what you want. That's all we're really doing. What do you want? But it's a lot easier for people to complain, right? It's a lot harder for them to get to the point to say, well, if you give me this, I'll be happy. Because of course, if you give it to them, they really don't want to be happy. They still want to complain, right? They still want to move forward. So for us, that the beginning starts with that relationship that we have with the people that we're serving. And we do mostly serve in the IT shop. We mostly serve the NCI staff that we work with. They have to serve different communities. You know, Edward was mentioning that they give out billions in grants. Well, you know, a lot of our staff are serving that U.S. research population, the cancer centers and all the universities and some pharma. And so they have to interface with them. So we have to support them interfacing with them. And so I would say it's just that. It's really kind of having a plan. And then, like I said, we use the objectives and key results to communicate that plan down to our staff. So even at NCI, I think we have 300 IT staff for 9,000 staff. So, you know, with the pandemic, I don't see any of these people anymore. You know, I used to run into them in the hallway. I could just catch up. They could maybe hear me talking outside the cube, so they would know what's going on. But now it's just everybody's at home, and that to be able to do that is much more difficult. And again, to get them to understand, why are we doing this? This doesn't seem right. And say, well, yeah, it doesn't seem right, but there's a method to the madness. And if you understand the longer strategy, you would agree. I think the other thing that you need to do is you need to pull on all the resources you have. Everybody has capabilities. Everybody has ideas and thoughts. And most of the time, those are not allowed to bubble up. So I think there was a mention about lean, and I'm a big believer in lean. And in lean, it basically says your workers are your biggest asset. So for me, I'm always trying to get my workers to tell me what should we do better? What should we do better? How could we do it better? And it's not easy for them. They're afraid. There's chain of command. There's, this might cost too much. I'm like, it costs like $1,000. You know how much money we're spending? You know how much money you cost, you know? So anything that can save just a few hours is a big money saver. But it's really, Byron said it, it's changing the culture to one of continual improvement. And right now, that's not really how a lot of the IT is seen. It's seen as, I need to build a solution, and once we build it, it's going to be great. It's like, well, no, because there'll be a new solution that we should be going to, right? Now it's low code, no code. Now it's a digital service center. But before it wasn't. It was, the previous panelist was like, it was Java beans, and it was all this crazy, complicated technology. So there's always a change. So I think you just have to get people used to saying, what do I like about today? I want to keep. What do I not like about today? I want to change. And then let's get some kind of standard way for us to communicate those changes so they can be addressed.
Great, thank you for that. And let's go to the polls. I got a couple polls, but something you said, Jeff, is going to be lead to my next question about the pandemic and how it's affected things. I think we'll dive into that a little bit more. This is kind of like just kind of a baseline here. I was kind of interested to see what this is, and if you work for a contractor, just whatever agency you work with. And yes, Zoom altered this. I know the VP at Federal over there, we might need to get him to make it so we can participate. I think that's okay. I don't think we're violating anything there. So but all you can vote, and if you can pull that up, I'm kind of interested. I think it's fairly well adopted, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, I think this has changed over the last few years. I think we did this 5 years ago, but interesting. And then let's go to the next one because it's going to lead in my next question. And the question is, in your opinion, how important are emerging technologies in digital modernization? I didn't really understand this in the beginning, but I think that technology is one aspect to digital modernization. It's the people, it's procurement. There's a lot of different things. But I'm interested to see what everybody comes back with. I don't want to taint the answers. All right, what do we have, Alyssa? Good. Yeah, it wasn't 100% very important. I think, and my next question is, how can leaders ensure execution on the mission and also build a culture of flexibility, inclusion, and collaboration with a hybrid workforce? You know, I think digital transformation with this COVID stuff and the hybrid workforce, it's kind of like two things coming together at the right time. And I know, Stacey, you talked about this a little bit, but maybe we can kick this off with you about how you're going to move forward now with this hybrid. You know, and I don't think you have a policy yet, but you know, how are things shaping up over there?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, one of our priorities here at CIT is, of course, supporting NIH's vision for the future of work, which is under development, because technology is really that force that brings us together and allows people to, you know, work smarter. But also, I love what you said, Tom, about we're really at this intersection of, you know, future of work or hybrid and digital workplace. I absolutely see them as complementary, you know, efforts, strategic efforts. And so I think that, you know, you started the poll by talking about the platforms. And I think one of the things that we've learned during the pandemic were that speed and agility are of the essence in responding to the agency's high priority needs. And so I would certainly encourage anyone out there to, you know, first take a hard look at the platforms that they already have in their environment. I mean, we have a couple key ones in our environment, and we deploy them for the entire enterprise. I think what's been really challenging about doing that at the scale and complexity required in a highly federated environment is that the one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work for us. There's a variety of needs from our different populations and communities across NIH. And so how you configure those is really important. And so one of the things we've looked at when we evaluate platforms or different aspects that platforms offer is how they can be configured and administered both at the enterprise and locally for someone like, you know, Jeff at NCI and his team. The other thing is I was really glad to see that people are looking to take advantage of emerging technologies, because just like, you know, kind of a single platform doesn't work for us in terms of the one-size-fits-all approach, we typically have a kind of variety of technologies that we're taking advantage of, both new and emerging. So another thing that's key is not just the configuration, but the integration. The ability to integrate with existing capabilities, because we are continuously striving to simplify both our technology and security architecture. I mean, Omar, you brought up security, and it's ever present, and we remain ever vigilant on our cybersecurity journey. So things like having the visibility into the systems, monitoring, access controls, encryption, data loss prevention. So that's a really, so having it all integrate and do so in a secure fashion is key. And then another thing that's been coming up here is about talking about the technical, that we've been talking about, is the technical savvy and skills of the broader workforce. So, you know, our kind of people, when we talk about people involved in our IT strategies and solutions, it's not just kind of customers and consumers, but also, you know, partners and providers. And what we found is people who used to be just a consumer are now creators. And so when we bring these platforms and these solutions and we deploy them at the enterprise, one of our guiding principles is to make sure that we configure and deploy them in a way that we can empower local innovation. So all of this, and then you overlay the fact that we are shifting to some form of hybrid environment, because we at NIH will not be returning to a pre-pandemic workplace. And that just further complicates the kind of strategies and approaches that we need to take as we modernize and expand our use of digital services. So when and equity is really a key kind of principle that needs to come into play with any kind of shift to hybrid, and to do it well. So that includes things like equitable access to the tools that people need to do their jobs, and really thinking about all the populations as we implement more digital workplaces and shift to some form of hybrid. So we've been, as we are creating our vision for the future of work, we're not just focusing on what most people are thinking about, like me, I want more telework, or I want to be a remote worker, but we're really focused on flexibility, because we have people where, you know, where they work is not flexible. And so, you know, a lot of the hybrid environments are, the models are founded in moving away from location-based models to human-centric models. And we can't forget those frontline workers in the process, or just people where the nature of their work is not that portable, like people we have working in labs. So we're looking at flexible work, more so than kind of just hybrid work. It's like flexible work in a hybrid environment. And what you flex is maybe not just where you work, but when you work and how you work. And again, I just think, you know, technology, both existing and emerging technologies, are pivotal to our success, and you know, wherever we go.
Thank you for that, Stacy. Maybe we can go with you, Ed. And I remember we did that event with you. I forgot about that, the EI event that we did for you. I thought it was so fabulous, like 3 years ago. I don't think we're going to be doing one anytime soon. It certainly wouldn't look like that, where we had 300-400 people in the main hall and people flew in from all over the country. I don't know. We might be in a different environment if we ever do that again.
Well, hopefully we can return to that stuff eventually. You know, I mean, when I look at FTA, the bottom line is right now with where we are, we could sustain doing remote work for basically ever right now. You know, we digitized what we needed to. You know, I mean, like if you're going to look at like getting there as part of your strategy, I think the main thing for us was making sure that we had good ways of tracking things and making them transparent. So, you know, whether you came asking for like a procurement or how to like change your HR benefits or things like that, we created portals for those types of things that were similar to our IT request thing, where like if your computer was broken or you needed to change your password, you know, you could go to a place and enter in a website, or you could call someone and it would be in a website and tracked. That's the same way it is for the rest of our back office processes. And then, you know, that helps internally, and then externally, of course, we have like our Triad platform where people can go for grants and oversight and things like that. But, you know, I think when we look at like the future of workforce, the thing that like nobody has really given a good answer for is how to address the cultural piece to it. And that's why I think there's going to need to be agility with our solutions. Because right now with what we're building towards, you know, the federal government honestly is an older workforce. So when you look at it on average right now, I think like the average age of a federal employee is around like 47, 48. You know, that's what I last read in Federal News, right? So, and you have like 30% of the population is older than 55. So like almost like 1 out of every 3 people is older than 55. They're already at retirement, you know? So the experience that they might want from the workforce will be different than what somebody that's 22 will want. You know, you're already established in your career, things like that. I don't know if you need to develop as much camaraderie. The fact is that if you're working from home, there's not really any difference whether I'm working for the Department of Transportation or Microsoft or Amazon. Like, I'm not building any real connections easily through a digital world. And so eventually we're going to have to start hiring, and we're probably going to have to hire some young people. And, you know, young people are more built around being in an office, going to happy hours and things like that after work. I mean, at least that's the way it was for me. And so I think that cultural piece hasn't been answered. And I think, you know, what we're doing right now is catering to an older demographic with the strategies that we're building with these remote work or hybrid work situations. And I don't have a good answer for it, but I'm just bringing up the fact that I think culture is missing from the solution. And I think that with the path that we're going down, it's going to cause us to have to do another shift later anyhow to address that. And that's something that we talk about a little bit, but we just don't have good answers for, to be honest with you.
You know, I look back to when I was young, and that was a long time ago. I mean, it was all about happy hours, getting to know people, and building a network. It's hard to build a network now. We're established. We've been around for a while, but it's hard for somebody brand new getting in to get into, you know, it's been stunted at a minimum. So yeah, lots of interesting points there. Omar, I did get a request that somebody wanted to know some information about the HUD Synergy Lab. Maybe we can do that as a takeaway if you can give us something, and how vendors can get engaged and that kind of thing. I'm assuming you have some kind of process, but anyway, back to the question. You know, what do you see at HUD on you know, the hybrid workforce and that kind of thing?
I think Edward, you know, shared exactly what we have in mind. The only thing I would like to add to his comment is we need to establish a digital collaboration platform that is transparent, that can be assessed in terms of impact to the government, because we really don't know this digital collaboration, what's going to be the benefit and what are the impact that we will be faced. So because it's new, it's a fairly like 2 years, 3 years. So this is something definitely we need to keep our eye on and make sure that it's the right platform for the future workforce. Now, the Innovation Lab at GNMA has been tasked to assess the future of work in terms of what is needed for us to establish and document in terms of the skill set, in terms of what we need for this young generation to join the government and be retained and trained and participate like we participate. So this is something, you know, we are working with our HR department, and we are working to make sure that we have the right platform for this young generation. And probably it's gonna we need to change a few things in the government to attract them properly. You know, some of the procurement stuff that we do, maybe it's archaic, maybe it needs to be innovated. So few things like that needs to be you know, looked at and evaluated honestly and thoroughly. So that's one. In terms of the HUD Synergy Lab or the Innovation Lab, the HUD Synergy Lab is a platform within HUD that bring in all the program offices within HUD to collaborate and participate in innovation. And they have a program that train fellows. And I was one of the fellows at HUD that just graduated last month. So we are put through this 4 months rigorous training and rigorous development. And at the end, we need to provide HUD with few prototypes. And we provided 6 prototypes that have been evaluated. And they are currently being assessed by HUD to be launched or developed. So it's been a very successful program, and the Innovation Lab of GNMA is a partner, as well as we have GNMA folks that are fellows. So that's basically what the HUD Synergy Lab within HUD is doing. And we are planning for the next cohort. So that's something that happy to report on.
Great. Yeah, and if we can distribute some information about it for everybody, because I got a few questions around that.
Absolutely.
And let's go with Byron.
So it's interesting. I think Stacy, Ed, Omar all hit really awesome points about this one. And I kind of look back, right, as before my journey with ICF, ITG, you know, I started a startup and we were we designed from front for remote only work. I think I had no more than one employee in any state. At the largest we were at, it was 20 people, which was a really fun tax season, let me tell you about there. But it was sort of, you know, the culture was designed for that. We were going to be working remote and we'd collaborate, sort of, we'd get together when we could, but we were going to work remote for it. You know, the government had kind of gone from a different perspective. And honestly, our enterprise customers are somewhere in between of, you know, they were thinking earlier that they were going to have to, as demographics change, as interests change, like accommodate and account for a different workforce and a different method of working. And the pandemic really kicked that into high gear. And we were all kind of caught off guard on the government services side about like, okay, how do we really effectively do that? Ed made a really awesome point about culture. And if I think about even our journey, right, from ITG to the acquisition by ICF, at 300 people and then growing to 500 people, but then having a 7,000 person company, right? I went from 30 people that I didn't know, I hadn't met personally, to 7,700 people that I had maybe only met once or twice on a screen there. And how do you create a culture that survives that? And it expands the problem set in government when we're all used to working and collaborating sort of in conference rooms, on desks, in hallways. Creating a culture that survives or it allows that sort of change there is really, really difficult. I think tooling is some of it. I think, you know, the focus on a different focus on career management, at least in the commercial side, it's been really key for us about building, you know, showing genuine interests in, you know, what people do and why they do it and what moves them and what drives them for what's the next opportunity that they could have, or what's the thing that they could be working on doing better. You know, the earlier question was sort of the poll question that kicked that all off was emerging technologies, right? And those really expands the tool belt to be able to support some of those other conversations and needs there. But yeah, it's this one specifically is something that we're going to be across government, industry, and other segments of the economy and industry are going to have to be dealing with for a bit. And as demographics change, as work patterns change, as what we'll accept for work and where talent winds up being, right? There isn't likely going to be pockets of talent that are easily accessible around different labs and businesses where, okay, I can hire a lot of people that I need that can all show up at Bethesda or at downtown DC. Like some of our best developers are going to be in the woods in Minnesota or on the bayou in Louisiana, and that's been true for us. And creating that kind of ability to rapidly assess and understand and build teams and then have them come together where we'd all used to do it at happy hour versus going to be at the client side or on a scrum call or within a client meeting. Like that's a really hard management challenge just in general. Yeah,
I think a lot of government agencies struggle with that DevOps thing. They assumed they had to all work in the same room, and then that went sideways. But it seems like the work's still getting done, and maybe even getting done better. And I think it goes back to that diversity and exclusion. EAS is, USDA, and they're in Fort Collins. Well, there's not that many African Americans in Fort Collins. So now you can really broaden out and really reach a wider segment of the population. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Jeff, I know you talked about this a little bit even in your keynote.
I would say it's very uncharted territory. We don't know. I didn't know what Edward was talking about when he started, because it sounded like he was going to say we don't need to work together, but then he ended up saying, you old people don't need to work together, like Omar and I know he was calling us out. And then, but hey, us young people, we need some social interaction. I can say that my son, he's actuary, he works in Virginia, and they just closed the office last week. They're closing the office is closed, but the company called him and said, because he's so young, said, hey, you should move to one of our offices around the country. And he's going to go visit those offices, because they're like, yeah, it's fine for the old staffers to kind of ride on what was created, their mental picture, their social picture of how it is. That's what we ride on. I'm kind of a person who needs that picture. I can't just switch jobs and come in as some expert. I'm like, I need to know how this place works. And so not everybody's like that, but I am. And I think a lot of people are. So I don't know. I don't know what the world holds. I don't think it can be all remote. I just don't. I think the trust level is not high enough. Look at the country. Don't trust anything. They don't even trust things that are proven, right? So is business going to do that? I mean, business has a succeed or fail model. So if you don't move forward, you're going to fail. So they're willing to take more risks, and the government is going to be here in 100 years. So it can't just take risks that so high that it fails. So I don't really know the answer. I don't think it's going to be as like it is today. We can work together today, and we can work, like you said, Tom, we can work better than we were working before. But that's going to come to an end. The fourth quarter of the game is when you give it your all, because you know the game's going to be over, right? But for us, you know, if we're gonna continue to work from home, I'm like, if you saw my desk, you'd be like, you really work from that desk? It's like, yeah, I do. And I'm just like, eventually I go back to work, so I'm not setting something up. But I don't want to work from home. I mean, I like rolling out of bed and just being so chill, you know, that thing. But I need the social interaction. I need to see the people I work with in the eye. I need those relationships. Again, I started out saying, you know, in this that Stacy and I work together a lot, and now we're not working together a lot. Well, Stacy came and visited me. I remember when she very first started, she spent like 2 hours listening to my pontifications. I was like, this woman's a good listener. So that kind of thing, that connection it's not doable. The other thing that's important to say is, you know, this group dynamic is weird. Like, you're listening to me talk. That's not how people work, right? I can see your faces, so I know you're laughing, whatever, but I can't see the other people. I can't see you. You're not allowed to just turn and say, oh, we tried that's going to fail, right? Those cross communications that happen with humans, because we have ears and a mouth and eyes, we can communicate in multiple ways at once, that none of that's happening in this world. So it's not a very good communicative thing. It's fine for me because I'm doing all the talking. I'm the boss. Everybody's got to listen to me. But all those hundreds of staff I have, there's no window for them to give me their input, maybe in writing or something. But so I do think this has got to end, and we got to find something that's going to be in between. I mean, they call it the hybrid, whatever. But we know technology is going to have a big place. To me, we just need some ways to measure it. How can we measure productivity? How can we measure what's happiness? And we don't want to end in some climatic disaster of, like, almost you hear the headlines, nobody's working anymore, nobody wants to work. I'm like, well, first of all, nobody ever wants to work. It's by definition work. Like, you work to get money for your family, and sure, you find self meaning for life in it, but it's still hard, right? It's still difficult. And I'd rather be playing golf, you know, sure, but I'd also rather make a difference with my life. You know, my life is going to be over at some point, and I want to have said I made a difference. I made the world better, but I don't think I could make it better by talking to a computer all day. Not anywhere near as much as I could by meeting with people.
This has been a very philosophical panel. I'm like, wow, this is really good. I love it. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. Byron, no pressure or anything. Can you put a bow on this discussion for today? Thank you so much for working, and then we'll close the program.
Sure. Gotta love the toss the grenade over to my lap. Thanks, Tom. No, I mean, we hit a whole host of really interesting topics here. I think you've made a good point of, like, this wound up being more philosophical organization than technology. And to be honest, like, as technical leaders, like, the language we speak when we're talking about how do I solve a problem, when we get outside of, okay, like, this network rack needs to be re-architected, or the system it winds up being very, like, how do we move people? Because at the end of the day, like, what business we're in is people, what we support are the communities that are all made of people, and how do we come to where they live and understand what moves them, and how that we can be better partners, better solution providers, better trusted advisors at all levels. And so, when we think about digital services as a broad concept, right? What we're talking in a lot of senses, like how do I expand the ability for us to serve the communities that need our support better. And that kind of, hits the philosophy argument of like, okay, all the stuff we talk about innovation, about, the platforms available, about, really the process and concepts about organizational change are all about getting to that point of being a little bit better able to serve the big mission needs that we all support.
Thank you, Byron. You did all right. Ed, Stacy, Byron, Omar, Jeff, thank you so much. I'd like to thank also ICF, Amy McKenna, Joy Stonker, David Yang, Byron, aforementioned Byron Caswell, John Dove, Jake Bekema. Thank you all. And we have one last poll for you. Do you want your seat? This is digital experience at its best. Do you want your certificate sent to you? You don't even have to ask us. You just have to click the button. We try to make it as easy as possible so we can make sure that you get it. And next up, we're talking tomorrow morning. Or actually, that's not tomorrow morning. That is Thursday. Okay. Working together for privacy protection, the importance of identity management. And we got a good panel for you there, and we're looking forward to it. Everybody have a great afternoon. It's been fantastic. I got a lot of good things out of it myself. It's been great. Appreciate your time. And thanks for your audience. I know it's 2 hours and 15 minutes of your day, but thanks for hanging in there. And great questions. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.